Hello and welcome to the Focusing Way podcast. I'm your host, David Battistella. Please share this podcast with others as a way of introducing them to the people, themes, concepts, and beauty of focusing. Our website is thefocusingway.com. Follow us on Twitter at The Focusing Way. This podcast is available on iTunes and Stitcher. Our philosophy is simple: focusing for better living. If you really enjoy this, you can support us by making a contribution via Patreon as well. All the links are on the website. Now, on to the good stuff. Breathing, your heartbeat, your feet grounded firmly into the earth. These are the sounds and sensations which are the undercurrent of our aliveness. Years ago, I sat at the precipice of a great adventure. I had flown halfway around the world to Italy, where I now live, to attend a 2-week silence retreat in nature. The place is a short 60 kilometers from where I now live. At the time, I was afraid, dealing with some life issues, and excited and afraid at the prospect of what 2 weeks in total silence might bring. We were, of course, accompanied by talented and compassionate teachers who had a lot of experience, but still, like most things unknown, our immediate reaction might be fear. The amazing things that came out of that experience are too long to list here. It changed me forever and for the better, and led me eventually to being able to come to things like focusing with an open heart and an open mind. I learned many lessons on that 2-week stretch, but perhaps not one more important than the last words spoken to us by our teacher before heading into this silence. He said, "When or if things become difficult, listen to nature." That was it. His last nugget of advice was to remember that we were surrounded by nature, by sounds, by temperature, by trees and rivers, and all these systems that were always there, always right alongside us, flowing like our own heartbeats, our own breath, and we had a place in all of it. I cannot recall how many times over the 2 weeks of silence I gave myself over to nature, to rest in her loving arms, or how many times I wrapped my arms around her welcoming sounds, but the image and words have never left me. The very first person who was generous enough to share with me on this podcast is Karen Liebengut. We met on a retreat in Germany, surrounded by nature, in a beautiful place outside of Hamburg. Karen spends most of her time now using focusing and mindfulness in nature, as she has active coaching sessions with people who come to her office, a London park, to reconnect with the source that gives us everything. And now for part 2 of my conversation with Karen Liebengut. It happens to time as well in that moment. And I'm experiencing it now. It's been I don't know how many months since the last time we spoke, but every time we reconnect, it seems like we've just had a conversation yesterday.
Yeah.
And there's a beautiful thing about that kind of feeling of picking up where you left off, and time and the absence of time, where we can actually enter moments where we stop counting it. And the experience becomes more important than counting the time.
Yeah.
Have you found that? I mean, you have, probably set times for your clients. How do you manage time in those situations? Do you find that these sessions are finding really natural ending places, or do they feel like for
Yeah,
the clients they go by very quickly? Or
yeah, they do sometimes, and some sessions do feel a little bit, time restricted. So I do keep an eye on the time, but within a coaching session that is 1 hour long, um, there are wonderful moments, just like you've just described, where I and my client together we are immersed in the present moment and not caught up in looking at the time or needing to be anywhere or needing to have something sorted or fixed or solved, but that have just the experience of being and experience as it is. So that's very beautiful, and that often happens within a clearly defined time frame that is 1 hour. Sometimes it feels, oh, there, it would be great to have another half hour. But then often, as in the focusing way, we sort of, let ourselves know that we can and will come back to this moment again next time and bring closure. And sometimes there are natural closures, just because the process often moves on naturally, and it feels to the client that, oh, this is a good ending now for today.
mm.
And that's lovely when that happens. So it's a little bit different. But I've also started this year, actually, because I've noticed that some of my clients would appreciate longer sessions, particularly in nature with a bit of time and space. I have started to offer half days of coaching in nature and actually day coaching. Days of coaching in nature. I call them immersion days. For the very reason to allow more time and space to slow down, to have longer periods of silence, to have more time to process, to experience, to be mindful, to talk things through. So I'm very, very happy with that, and very excited about it as well, because it allows me to go to different places in London and meet my clients where they are at, because I can do it for a longer period. I can travel when I meet clients for half a day or a day.
Right. Wow. That sounds like a really nice immersion for somebody who's evolved from from doing the 1 hours to
Yeah,
into half days or full days. It feels like, just as you were saying that, it just felt like sort of the importance of the retreat.
yeah,
I think you and
yeah,
I met in a retreat setting, and we
yeah,
sort of certainly can both appreciate and understand the importance of pulling ourselves away from the day to
yeah,
day to reconnect with things within ourselves, or ask ourselves the questions we want answered. But
so,
that idea of having a sort of a retreat within your own, sort of not far, like, because I often also say that a retreat is outside your front door. It doesn't
yeah,
have to be, it doesn't have to be up to the top of a mountain or to a monastery somewhere, or, it can also be right out your front door, and you can do them in many ways throughout the course
yeah,
of a day or a week.
yeah,
But
very much.
you touched on something about focusing there, and I wanted to ask you, or I wanted to sort of talk a little bit about focusing as a natural way of being,
Yeah.
and whether you've come to sort of, through this process and through your understanding of focusing, I mean, are are you feeling like focusing is a very natural way of being?
Oh, yes, definitely. And yeah, particularly, I think, again, nature is such a wonderful context or container or setting for letting the natural process of focusing unfold. Because nature allows us to slow down, to sort of sense for what's there inside, for what's there, what needs our attention outside. So it's fantastic, and it doesn't need very much else really once we are out in nature, because there's a natural slowing down happening and a natural looking in and looking out, if you like. So for me, the natural settings, green spaces, nature are in a way, natural focusing fields.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That we can just sort of be in and sense into our experience, sense for how our life is going. And it's sort of there.
Mm-hmm.
And then what's needed is the listening to that. The listening. And that happens through the movement, the walking, the listening in, reflecting back, which again happens very naturally while walking, or sitting somewhere on a bench for a moment to sense inside and to share it and to have it reflected back. Wonderful process, particularly in nature, the focusing process. I think it's something we all do naturally, and I think outside, for me, it's sort of reinforced the natural, because it's so sensory, right? It's so sensory being outside. We cannot help it, if you like.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But sensing, we cannot help it, but sensing inside and outside.
Where did your passion for nature, where did it begin?
It began when I was very young. And I have much gratitude to my mother, who loved being in nature, who was so interested and enthusiastic and passionate about everything nature. And we would go out on long walks, even when we were very young. We would always spend time outside at the weekend. We would always look at flowers. We would always look at, what tree is this, what tree is that. We would have lots of picnics, I remember. We would always go out with some food in our rucksack and sit somewhere. Fantastic, really. So I have much gratitude to my mother. And it's continued. I think I must have noticed as a child, early on in my life, what a positive effect nature had on me. How I felt at the end of a day when we had spent a day out or half a day. And I continued spending time in nature. I think it was a natural knowing for me that when I spent time in nature, I would be well and I would feel well and all was well. So from a young age, it's been tremendous support for me, nature, and refuge, if you like. So it's a theme, it's my story really, nature, and has always been part of who I am and part of how I live, and a big part of what helps me on a day-to-day basis to, cultivate positive emotion, resilience, enjoyment, all these things. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, no, I was just going to say that allows me really to live in a big city like London, which some people who know me well sometimes wonder about. What on earth are you doing in London? Why don't you live in the countryside, in the middle of nowhere? But actually, nature's everywhere. And the way I live in London allows me to, like today, basically I spend all day outside from 10 o'clock this morning till I came home 4:15 just before our meeting. And, I feel so well right now, even. I mean, talking about my work and my passion, of course, is inspiring and presses all my good buttons. Yeah. Uh, yeah, even in London, I feel very close to nature, very connected to nature, because it's everywhere.
It's true. London is a city with amazing green spaces.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very well planned in that sense. But I was wondering, as you were speaking, if with your coaching, was there a time where you thought it had to be sort of sitting across a couch? Like, was there a moment when it was that and then it evolved to this? Or did you always know that it would be you helping people in green spaces?
No, not initially, actually. It really had to come to me, and it did come to me on a long walk in nature on my own. So I do regularly take myself out into nature on a long walk, because that's when I have my best ideas and can process my own experience and brainstorm for myself. No, when I first started seeing clients and set up my private practice, I did have a consultation room inside, and I didn't enjoy it so very much. I didn't enjoy being in a room, seeing one client after the other, and I felt quite drained, and something was missing. And it came to me on a long walk that, what if I took my clients into nature where I feel most resourceful and happiest, as I said earlier. And that was a fantastic idea, and I was very excited about it and talked it through with my then own coach, and did a bit of planning and thinking through, and I then asked 4 people I knew, not close friends, but friends of friends, whether they would be willing to do a coaching while walking session with me, and in return for a little bit of feedback. And that's how it really began. Wow. And everybody who did a trial session with me very much enjoyed it, very much liked it. Everybody said, this is fantastic. And that gave me great confidence that I was on about something that could work really well and could offer something of great value to people, and something quite different, and something very needed as well, because so many people spend so much time indoors and so little time outside. So it has, of course, that positive side effect of, not only sort of working things through and exploring some issues perhaps and moving forward, but also it always means an hour outside. Mm-hmm. People come to me, it's an hour of walking in nature, which of course in itself has great value. Yeah.
So I think London is a beautiful city. It's got a lot of green space. It's also known to be kind of a rainy city. What do you do about rainy days or inclement weather? How do you handle that?
Yeah, I'm surprised you didn't ask me this already. This is a typical question, and my answer to that is, well, the weather is part of nature. So whatever the weather, we go and walk and talk, and people love it.
Mm-hmm.
People love this approach. So what I typically say is, wear sturdy, comfortable shoes, warm clothes, and a raincoat if need be. And I have always my little umbrella as well, just in case, there is some bigger rain. But usually, I think so I've started working outside with my clients in 2009. So that's a few years. I think in all this time, I've rescheduled 2 sessions because it was literally pouring down with rain, and it would have been silly to be out there.
Mm-hmm.
But otherwise, generally, it's a little bit of rain, it's some drizzle, it's a shower. In the summer, of course, it's fantastic. The trees give such wonderful shelter when there's some rain. And in the winter now, I think last week I had a session almost entirely in the rain, and my client and I, we were very well dressed, prepared, walking boots, raincoat, woolly hat, and off we went. And we had the park to ourselves.
Yeah.
And nature can teach us so many things, and the weather is just, it's something we can only really relax into. We can't control, we just have to be with. And when we can, it's what it is. And we can see that any weather has its particular quality and has something to offer to us. So that's really what I'm tapping into. So I'm not a fair weather coach or mindfulness practitioner. I work in around the seasons and in any weather because it's got something to offer to us.
Yeah, that moment informs the moment. That weather informs. And how often does that really happen? It must happen often.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I mean, particularly in England, it changes all of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it sort of helps us really see that, how everything changes and how we can only really relax into that. And when we can, all is fine, all is well.
Yeah, and maybe that's change and a constant state of change is actually our right way of being too.
Yeah, absolutely. We are not static. We are in process all of the time. Yeah, and so is the weather. Changes all of the time. And if we can allow ourselves to relax into that and to go with that flow, it comes with such a relief. Because then we don't have to push and pull anymore, or not like it, or we can just relax into that space that just is. And that's where we can meet ourselves in that moment as well. Not needing to pull or push or needing to fix anything.
Such a beautiful, beautiful image. And with that, I'm just basking in sort of my London walks that I've had by myself, and imagining your lovely work with people and how the kind of connection that they are having, in a focusing way, in a mindful way, to themselves. And I bow down to this work that you're doing, and the kind of patience and the quality of presence you're bringing to your clients, who I think are very, very fortunate people.
Yeah, I enjoyed very much. I mean, it's a mutual benefit, I think, working in this way. Definitely. Yeah.
I can certainly say that I am very, very grateful that you took the time out of your schedule today, seated indoors,
Oh,
to have this
yes.
conversation with
Yeah.
me. I really appreciate it. And I'm
In
sure.
my mind, I've been outside.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for this conversation.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
To the Focusing Way podcast. Our podcast is available on iTunes and Stitcher. Subscribe, visit our website at thefocusingway.com. Follow us on Twitter at thefocusingway. Please share this podcast with others as a way of introducing them to the people, themes, concepts, and beauty of focusing. Really enjoy this and want to support us? You can support us using Patreon as well. I'm your host, David Battistella.